Up here I got my wife, my daughter Reagan, and then my son Trace. So if you haven't met my daughter, she claims to be the boss, and if you have met her, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. So I went to school here at Hastings College. I've been in drip irrigation since about the fall of 2013 is when I started. And then I think going on about my 7th year here with NutriDrip. So the joke's always kind of been like when I started out, when I was talking to Kurt, I'll never forget this, that we were in Aurora, Nebraska, sitting there, and he's like, well, tell me a little bit about yourself. And I said, I'm just a whole digger. And what that meant was I've done drip for a long time, but never really knew the whole ins and outs of what really went on with the drip system. And so I think as we talk about this stuff, when I was putting this together, I thought, it's kind of the same thing we deal with a lot of growers. We talk to a lot of guys who have a lot of experience with drip irrigation, but what experience have they had? Like, what do you turn your irrigation system on and let it run for 24 hours? That's kind of the mentality I had when I first started with NutriDrip. So, Kurt, Ted, Doug, which is Kurt and Ted's dad, they've done a phenomenal job creating a really, really good team around all of us. And so, I can tell you firsthand, I got lost today when Nathan was talking about the agronomy. All right, but the fortunate part is we have an outstanding team that's here to support you. Whether it's agronomy, whether it's irrigation management, soil probes, automation, whatever it is, we have a really, really, really fundamental sound team. So as we go through this, understand that there's just a lot more than just turning on the water. So here's what my top 5 key components kind of to understand on a drip system are. So understanding your design. So I handed this out. This is a farm kind of down by Clay Center, Nebraska. Pretty basic farm. It's got 6 zones on it. So let's take a step back. How many of you know where your irrigation design is? Right? Like, we turn the water on, and when we're talking through this, it's not just about NutriDrip systems, because we service probably, 15 to 20,000 acres that we service, and not all of them are obviously NutriDrip stuff. And so, if you don't know where your design is, it's really, really, really hard for us to help you when we show up to know what's going on. Whether it's spring startup, where you call and say, hey, I've got an issue. Well, that's great, but is your valve supposed to be set at 12 pounds, or you're supposed to be set at 24 pounds? And so, when you leave today, obviously, if you can, whether it's Central Valley Ag or whoever installed it, call them and see where your design is. Because it's not only going to help you, but it's also going to help us when we try to help you. The other thing is irrigation sets. So, again, there's a lot of different mindsets out there. Obviously, we have ours, but there's different philosophies. I know there's been some conversations today about, it's super dry, yeah, we caught a rain, but how are we going to water our crop up? And so we'll go through that a little bit. And then just the filter station hydraulics. What to look for at your filter station. That's one thing when you show up, typically it's by your well. And so when you show up there, what are some key things to look at? And then valve pressures, checking kind of the pressures, and until I met Kurt, I never thought of this. It's one thing if your valve on the top of your field is reading 18 pounds like it should. Well, what's your bottom end look like? What's your flush valves? What are those pressures like? If you got 2 pounds at your flush, your flush valve, the things that come up at the end of the field, are you irrigating uniformly? So just some things like that, and then some in-season flushing. So the first thing is understanding your design. So I know this is hard to read. Like I said, that same thing up there is kind of what you have here. If we need to turn the lights on, we can. So obviously John Maxwell is our TSP, our designer. So we know he's going to say, typically we need that 30 to 35 pounds right at the well. All right, and so now we understand that all systems aren't like that. There's some that are designed at that 18 to 20 pounds or whatever it is. But when we show up, we need to understand, hey, if I need 20 pounds and I've only got 14 pounds at my inlet pressure, I've got an issue. All right, and so we need to make sure that that overall system pressure is matching what the design says. Same with your gallons per minute. If you're supposed to be irrigating at 800 gallons a minute and you're only irrigating at 200 gallons a minute, you probably have an issue somewhere. Valve pressures, we'll get into that a little bit more in depth, but each valve, they're going to have a bunch of little schrader valves on the, whether it's right at the filter station or your zone valves, we need to know what those valves are supposed to be set at, because that's telling you how much water you're putting out. So if your valve's supposed to be at 22 pounds and you're only at 14 pounds, we're not operating to design. Irrigation blocks. So on this one, you can kind of see there's 6 zones. 3 of them are blue, 3 of them are red. So when we look at this map, those 3 blue zones, they run together. The 3 red zones run together. So if you have a controller and you say, okay, you know, whatever system 1's running or however your controller's set up, that's what's running, typically. All right, we can kind of help you as we, again, if we have a design, we can kind of understand what's going on with zone 1, zone 2, all the way through 6. We typically like to set our zones up in about 12 to 15 acres per zone, just to give you the flexibility. You know, on a 30-acre piece, or, you know, you might say, well, I can irrigate all this at one time. Yeah, you can, you're right. But what happens if your well ever goes down? You know, like, are you able to actually irrigate all that together? And as well as flushing, and we'll get into that a little bit more too. So the zone boundaries, same thing, you know, for us. You know, as Nathan and Kurt talked about Irrigation and some imaging things, you know, if we don't know where your zone ends, we don't know if you have issues or what zone that issue might be in. You know, it's pretty distinct. If you have a zone that's plugging up or whatever, you know, you'll look at it on a map and it'll just be like a straight line. Well, typically that's a zone. Well, if we have this design, we can say, hey, zone 5 has an issue. We need to address that. The valve locations, again, that's more for just when we show up, making sure that where everything's at, so we can go straight there and make sure you don't have any issues there either. Tape size, you know, there's a bunch of different sizes. We typically use that 5/8 to 7/8 tape, but there's obviously, you know, a 1-inch and bigger stuff that we service. So, any questions on the design? Is there any questions on some of the stuff we just went over there on the design?
You want that to be sent here?
Typically, yes. You know, so that way when we talk about our service team, we can put that file in under your contact in Odoo. Odoo is our system that we use. And so that way we say, Burdette called, you called me, I put it into Odoo, and I tag Ted and each and say, zone 4 has an issue or whatever. He thinks it's not irrigating properly. They can look at your design, and they can go there with the exact parts they may need and have a really good idea what's going on, where things are at. So yeah, if we can get your file, that'd be great.
Okay.
And I know, and like I said, it's not end of the world, because I know there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of systems out there that don't have designs. It just makes it really, really, really tricky for us to service. And obviously, you're not exactly sure what's going on. So irrigation sets. As we get into this year, there's obviously a lot of different philosophies out there, like I said. And if you look, again, it's hard to see, and I apologize for that, but it'll say, so I took this right off of this map, and so how we figure out how many inches you're applying is, we take the precipitation rate. So on this one, I'll just tell you, it's 0.032 times your run time. So whether it's 6 hours, 12 hours, 18 hours, 24 hours, whatever it is, that's going to give you the inches applied. So that's going to tell you how many inches I've ran that set. So here, if we go 0.032 times 1, obviously that's 0.032. Okay, typically we'll give you a 1 through 24 precip chart, so that way, if you ran it for 15 hours, you know exactly what you put on. So we're kind of at that, as Kurt talked about a little bit earlier. We've kind of settled on that 1/4 inch a day, is kind of where we've kind of landed a little bit on. Obviously, ET and some other variables that fluctuate, so we can go up in watering, down in watering if we need to. But for this system right here, if we wanted to put a 1/4 inch on, we could run 8 hours on the 3 sets and 8 hours on the other 3 zones, and you got a 1/4 inch over the whole field. Does that make sense? On this field. Now, obviously, not every field's the same. But, so then if you go times 12, if you run it for 12 hours, you're at that 0.38, and then obviously 24 hours is that 3/4 of an inch. Now, here's where I struggle with a little bit is, You know, we talk about, you know, how we irrigate. There's plenty of data out there. Probably my number one biggest pet peeve that when we talk to guys is, we say, hey, how's your irrigation going? Oh, you know, I turned it on at 7 o'clock this morning and I went and switched zones, you know, today at 7 o'clock. So I let it run for 24 hours. Well, what does that do? You've heard Nathan, you've heard talk about all morning long. Where does that water go? You know what I mean? So if you want 3/4 of an inch, that's fine, but let's break it up. Let's go, you know, 8 or 12 hours here, 8, 12 hours here, and then come back to it. Where we see the issues is when you run it for that 24 hours or that 3/4 of an inch at one time, that water just goes up and down. So now you got a chip. Well, you're all talking about this dry year we're having right now. So we would actually probably say, let's take that 8-hour set and let's break it up into 4 hours. And let's just continually go 4 hours, 4 hours, 4 hours, 4 hours to really get that water to move up and out. Do you understand where we're going? Allow that, I think of it like a sponge. I think of it instead, let that water just kind of move out like a sponge. All right, so if you see an emitter, it's funny because if you go down a compact road and you see where an emitter's at, it's a real tight circle. Sometimes if you're out in a disc field, you know, you see this big old balloon out here like this. So just understanding what the water's doing, and again, back to your design, what's my precip rate? Obviously some emitters are different than others, but we need to know exactly what's going on so we can give you as much help as we can give you when it comes to an irrigation set. Does that make sense? Is there any questions there? Go ahead.
I don't have a system, so this is, is there a delay when you turn it on? Is there a delay from one end of the field, from the head end of the drip tape to the other end of the drip tape?
Like a charging system?
Yeah.
Like how long it takes to charge the system to optimal irrigation?
That's always kind of.
Yeah, so we'll have a really good idea of that, and that's hydraulically, that's somebody like John Maxwell is a lot smarter than I am. So he'll kind of have that figured into our run times, and then obviously Kurt is a really good resource to rely
Just
on.
give me an idea. Is it?
Oh, I would say.
Is it an hour? Is it?
I mean, most
20
systems,
minutes?
depending on your head pressure, like at that 30 to 35 pounds, I would say the first time it might be closer to that 45 minutes before it's fully charged and the zone's ready to roll, 45 minutes to an hour. But you know, as a system, as you run the system throughout the season, I would say you could probably knock that maybe down to 20 minutes, half an hour, you know, depending on the terrain and the lay of the land. Obviously, if you're going up and down hills, it might be a little
Is that due
bit.
to the fact that you've got a static volume of water that's stored in there?
Well, yeah, right.
At that time?
I mean, Kurt, I'll let you kind of allude to that maybe a little bit too.
Yeah, depending on the lay of the field, if it's going to drain all the way down when you shut it off every time, or is it pretty flat and it's going to keep the drip line full, that's going to depend on how much it actually drains out. But I would say, yeah, the 10 to 20 minutes to charge it, depending on how long the runs are, once you've got it charged that first time, is a good rule of thumb.
And does that depend on whether it's pressure compensated?
Not really.
Not really.
Not necessarily. No, they'd both be about the same.
About the same?
Any other questions on this?
One of the first things Kurt said was about 2 hours, most efficient, 2 hours on, 2 hours off, whatever. Then would you have that 10-minute delay before the top end of the field and the bottom end every time you turn it on?
Right.
Right,
Yeah. And that's one of the things we don't want to shorten that cycle too much. Like you could say, well, I want to do every 60 minutes, right? And do 12 60-minute cycles. Well, what will happen is you will end up overwatering the bottom end of the field, or if your field is sloped, because you're going to drain down every time, you're going to get extra water there. So there's kind of some rules of thumb that we don't want that. We don't want that cycle. I think it's like we don't want that cycle time to be more than 10% of your total run time. That charge time. So if we've got a 10-minute charge period, then we need to run at least 100 minutes.
Okay.
To be uniform, otherwise we're going to end up with some ununiform areas in the field.
So Kurt, you ever have some where you just turn, if you're running 3 zones, maybe you turn one zone on and one zone off, and you go across the
Yeah,
field
we do.
that way?
Yep, drop zones. Yeah, we call them. Yep.
Except you maybe don't want to do that if you're, if you're fertigating maybe, or would it not matter?
No, that wouldn't necessarily be, well, yeah, it's gonna be difficult to keep your fertigation the same unless you're doing the whole field the same. Right, yep, it can get a little challenging. Yep.
But that probably makes sense, because it'll pressure up quicker if you only are
Correct.
doing one zone at a time.
Yep. And that will depend on zone size and well flow and all those things as well. Yep.
Anything else? Okay, so here's our filter stations. And I'll just kind of go through how, for the guys that, again, don't understand it or don't have a system. So when the water comes out of the well or the inlet, okay, we're going to go up into that top manifold. All right, and obviously you can see these little valves here on top of the filters. Those are your backflush valves. So that's what helps control when our system goes into backflushing. That valve right there helps control that operation. So then we're going to go through the tanks. There's a median line on the tanks, kind of where you can see that net of them. It's right around that area, and those are full of sand. So then we're going to come out the bottom manifold. We're going to go to the water meter, which is, we like to put our water meter after the filters so we know exactly how much water is going to the system. So some of you may have seen some water meters before, right, wrong, or indifferent. You could argue that all day. It is what it is at this point. So then obviously we go down here into the field. How we base our filtration is on your water quality. We talked about iron and manganese being our two biggest things when we talk about plugging. We don't do anything without taking a water quality test. So before we really, Ryan, he's putting a system in this spring, he was ready to put the pad in. And so we had him make the pad a little bit bigger. We didn't have the water quality test back yet, so we had to make it a little bit bigger in case we had to add another tank if he had anything wrong with his water. So again, we are 98% of the time you will not see a NutriDrip system out there with only 2 tanks on it. And if it is, it's crystal clean water that Kurt and our research and development team have gone through and 100% confident in it. So then we'll get into this a little bit too. So here's our backflush. You'll see the blue tank or the blue pipe on the back. That right there, that's where the backflush water goes, and we've got a little brass ball out there. We really should start taking off the handles. Please don't touch those. Please leave those alone. Our service crews really do a good job of making sure those are regulating how they need to be. Please don't touch those. So any questions kind of on how that filtration works as far as in and out for those guys, for those of you that are first time users? Makes sense?
Trevor, maybe just go through real quick what that brass valve does in case it does.
So it regulates the sand, right? So it makes sure, so if you have that thing wide open, and you go out there, I've seen it where there's just a big old pile of sand right there because it's regulating how all that functionality works there. Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, let's go a little deeper on that.
Let's go a little deeper.
Yeah, this is a pretty common issue. Okay, so when you backflush, basically we're taking the bottom side pressure and we're lifting that sand bed. And we want that sand bed to get fluidized so that any debris that's caught in there will come out the backflush line. The problem is if this valve is open too far, it will actually fluidize it too much and it will lift the sand all the way out and it will come out your backflush pipe. So there's a sweet spot where that valve needs to be set where you get maybe a kernel of sand if you caught 5 gallons and there was 1 kernel of sand in there, that'd be about right. Okay? But if you're getting a stream of sand, it's open too far. If you're getting no sand at all, it's squeezed too much, and the filter can't lift it. It can't lift that sand bed up and fluidize it. So that's kind of the hydraulics of how those valves are supposed to be set. Make sense?
Yeah.
No, good. You're not done.
How often should you be looking at those
Yeah, how often?
ponds?
Once a year. I mean, usually we figure once a year is enough, unless you have really bad water, like in bad water meaning iron, manganese, or you have surface water with algae and silt. So those two, those would be the things that I would be checking them more frequently.
You mean to take the sand out?
Look at the sand. So the sand, if you open your lids up, you need to be able to dig down in that sand like a sandbox. If the sand is packed, it's like all stuck together, it's like it's caked in there in layers, then it's potentially time to replace the sand or treat it with acid. So basically that sand can get locked together and then it's not going to do a good job of filtering. So,
Okay,
yep.
thank you.
And our crews are supposed to check that, so that's part of their startup checklist.
So when we show up to the filter station, or you as the grower shows up to the filter station, the number one thing that I always go look at is that middle picture right there. And that's your gauge. That's telling you what your inlet pressure is, and that's telling you what your outgoing pressure is. So when we talk about what's going on, you know, if your system's supposed to run at 22 pounds and you get there and it's at 40 pounds, and you switch that dial and it's at 10 pounds, we've probably got an issue, right? Like something's plugging up. What Kurt said, you're not backflushing properly, something's in the tanks. You know, there's different kinds of media that people have been using. So that's just kind of the first initial look I look at. Or if it's at 24 pounds and you're only at 10 pounds, you know, we might have a big leak downstream somewhere. So then if you correlate that with your water meter, if you go back to looking at your design and your pressure's where it needs to be and your flow's where it needs to be, and there's those water meters, if you're supposed to run at 450 gallons and you're running at 470 gallons or 430 gallons, it's probably not a huge deal. Those things aren't always, you know, directly spot on where they're supposed to be. Now, if you're at 350 gallons, you know, 100 gallons less or 50 gallons less, then it might be time to start giving us a call. We can see, kind of trying to diagnose what's going on. And then that little black thing right there, that's not a sprinkler. That's called your pressure relief valve. And so if you see that thing going off, what can happen is they got a little set screw on top, and so not all the time, you know, like when we turn it on the first time, we're not always perfect in, you know, how we set everything all the time. But maybe we've adjusted that too tight, or, you know, the system's pressured up finally really good, and so then that thing will go off. However, that's kind of like your little safety switch. So if you have something really bad going on downstream, whether it's a valve that doesn't open up, you know, on an automated system or something of that job is to release enough pressure in water that, not water, because it's only going to, pressure, so that way it saves everything going on downstream. Does that make sense?
Do you have a high pressure cutout through though, fail safe though?
So we don't install those. Typically, like your electrician, you know, we would work hand in hand with that. Just because everything's so different, whether it's a power unit or an electric, you know, whatever it is, we can work with the electrician to help with that, but we don't install them on our systems. So Kurt kind of already talked about it a little bit. That kind of annoying box that beeps at you all the time, that's telling you your batteries are still working. That's your backflush controller. So a lot of times we're going to set our filter station up to backflush on a parameter of, you know, if your system runs really good at 5 pounds and we set it at 8 pounds or 9 pounds, that's when it's going to backflush. If it gets outside of that, it's going to send it into a backflush. There's some systems out there that never do that, and so then we set it on time as well. So whether it's once every 12 hours or, you know, some waters once every 24 hours, whatever it is, then it will still send it into that backflush. As Kurt alluded to, you know, you can kind of see on the left, that's when it's in filter mode or filtration mode as we're irrigating, and so the water's going down through there and out. Well, now when it's in backflush, as he talked about, it reverses itself, fluidizes, and goes up out of the top, and then out your backflush. The main reason we run 3 tanks and not 2 tanks is because of this exact process right here. It's really hard for me to comprehend how 2 tanks, one you're in backflush, you're irrigating how you need to be. So with 3 tanks, 2 tanks are filtering, 1 tank is backflushing. If you run a 2-tank system, 1 tank's trying to do all the work, the other tank's trying to backflush, And now we go into the cycle, and that's where we're at. Especially if the water quality, if you're struggling with water quality. If you have water quality issues, I don't understand 2 tanks just, it's a hard thing for me to process. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? I mean, it's pretty simple. Like I said, so the biggest thing here is for you guys to understand is that backflush controller's got a job to do. And so we'll check the batteries in the spring and make sure it's all set. Once it's set, you know, we'll show you how to look at it, see how many times it's backflush, do it, you know, all those things. But it's really important to make sure when you show up daily or whatever it is that your batteries are still working properly. And how we can do that is like I said, I think it's like every 20 seconds there's a beep, and that's how you know, obviously, firsthand that the battery's working. Otherwise, there's a little, I should have brought one out here, but it's like a little backwards L. If you push that button, the screen will light up or turn on, and then that's how you know that it's working or the batteries are charged. So typically we replace those batteries. We think it's a good idea every spring, in my opinion, to replace those. And so, yeah, I think that's pretty well covers that. Checking your valve pressures, another important piece to the puzzle, obviously, to know that your system's working exactly how it needs to be working. Probably outside of the filters, obviously the number one thing to check. I don't know that you need to check it every day. Like I said, our crews, our service team, they do a phenomenal job of setting these when they're out there and actually record what each valve's doing. And so when they report it back to Ted and Deech, we actually know, hey, that valve's at 18 pounds when they left, you know, so if it gets to 30 or if it gets to 10, we know we have an issue. So not a great picture, but so you'll see like when obviously the summit comes in, the main comes in, goes through the valve, so the valve will have a little arrow on it, it'll show the flow of the water, and then down into your zone. So there's little Schrader valves on both sides, and so you can check, hey, I've got 18 pounds here, I've got, you know, 17 pounds here, I know the valve's working right. So typically all we use right here is just a little tire gauge. You can see it right there hooked onto a Schrader valve on an air vent, and we let that thing go. The important part here is, you know, if you switch zones or you're out there and you switch zones and you want to say, hey, I want to check my valve pressure today, give us some time like we talked about to charge up, because right when you turn that valve to the next set, it's not always going to just turn on and be at 18 pounds. It's going to take a few minutes, like as we talked, for that valve to get where it needs to get. I've got a little clip here. I'm not very computer savvy. Trent was my wingman here, and he failed me. Trent, what are you doing?
It's going.
Oh, man. So 2 things don't happen. Trevor doesn't present, and Trevor doesn't deal with technology. So you surround yourself with a good team. So here's a video here out in Elwood, Nebraska. Hasn't been ran much, so customer called and asked if it wants over, make sure everything is working as it should be. This is the zones here, so run this zone right here, just check the pressures, making sure the pressures match what the design says, and then we go back up to the well, make sure that the flow, pressure of the well also matches what the design says. One advantage you get when you choose which grip is if one call away, come out mid-season, for whatever reason you may have, take a look at your system to make sure that it's running just how it's supposed to be, to make sure you're comfortable with it. About 7 pressure, so you'll see there's little Schrader valves here after the pressure pilot. Set the pressure, check the pressure, let it run for a while, make sure, come back and make sure that it's maintaining the same pressure. So the little system here out by Elwood, Nebraska. We're up here at the well now. Just one small zone on the other side right now, just to check it. It needs to be at 8 gallons a minute. We're right there at 84 gallons a minute. See our standard media filtration system. enough of that. Now I gotta get back to how it should be. You as the customer. We are here to support you. Get a hold of us. Nathan, where you at?
What?
Come find me my thing again, will you please? Anyhow, so that kind of just gives an overview why he's getting to that. And again, it's not something that we would probably recommend, you know, once every month or whatever you want to say. You know, like it's just something to keep in the back of your mind of, hey, I probably should go check my valve pressure once in a while here to make sure things are going well. So go to the flushing.
So Trevor, when you have remote control, how much of this pressures and stuff are actually fed back through that? Can you see any of that? Or
Yeah, you can see all of that. You can see your flow. You can see, and we can actually set alarms up. So you know if that valve is supposed to be set at 18 pounds and it gets too high or too low, we can set alarms within those parameters to make sure that you're getting that on your
does the
phone.
backflush show?
The backflush will show
Pressure
biggest.
differential on the backflush?
Yeah, it's tied in too as well. So,
Okay.
yeah, an automated system, you know, obviously there's some systems that it doesn't make sense to be automated, but 90% of the systems, just for that functionality, you know, that's a big thing to be able to look at and see what's going on, and it helps us be able to help you as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So flushing. In the springtime, we're going to come out if you have obviously one of our service contracts. Which, while we're on that topic, if you're here and have a system and haven't gotten a service contract and are in need of some help, let us know today so we can get you in with Deecha and Ted, and that way we can get you on the schedule for this spring. So when they come out in the spring, they're going to do a really good flush. You know, before we get things started up, just get any debris out of the system that's sat there over the winter time. And then, obviously, in the fall when you're done, we're going to do one too, or you can do it. We'll flush it out. In season, I think a lot of this, you know, you guys talked about using the acid-based fertilizer and cleaning, you know, how that cleans the system out, which I agree with totally 100%, but creating enough turbulence in there to clean the emitter out, you know, in season or post season, whatever it is, yeah, that's keeping it clean, but you're just irrigating with it at that point. So I think it's really important that when we do a back flush, that we're creating enough turbulence to make sure we get all that junk or whatever's in those emitters or in the tape out of there. And then with an acid flush, again, it really depends on your water quality. We typically say every 3 years or 27 inches of water is kind of what we recommend. Now, obviously, with this new fertilizer program, I don't know what that looks like. I think it's important, you know, that we take regular water samples. And if it's a system that's not installed by us, I think it's important that we get a water sample for your system, so that way we know exactly what we're dealing with as well. And again, we have Halbmaier. He's kind of our, well, he is our mad scientist a little bit. He is involved in our research and development team, so if you do need an acidization, he's the guy that comes out and hooks on and does all of your acids. So, and is there any questions on the flushing? I will say, everybody asks, what would you recommend? I say you can never flush too much. I mean, if you think you need to flush, you know, at the end of an irrigation cycle, you catch a couple of rains and you have some time to spend and you want to go flush your system, you're not going to hurt your system by doing it. So I think it's just a good way of reassurance and making sure things stay clean.
So how long does it take to flush?
Again, I don't think half an hour, probably 45 minutes, I think on each stone is probably a good number just to create enough turbulence in there to flush all that stuff.
Are you turning it on and off or something to get the turbulence?
No, so what we're doing is, and I hesitate saying this, and then you go trying it, Ryan. Like, let us come out there and help you. But so what we're gonna want to do is, like, say if you irrigate in 6 zones, and or whatever it is on yours, I can't even remember right off the top of my head. But for easy math, let's go 4. And we can do it and keep the pressure where we need to keep it. Like, we'll back that down to 3 zones, maybe even 2 zones, just to create enough turbulence through there, and just shoot everything out the flush valves, making sure those flush valves are open at the end of the field. Yeah, bring the pressure up and create enough turbulence to evacuate anything that's in there. So, and we can help you, you know, obviously we want to help you on, especially on that first time, just to make sure we're not wrecking, because every system's different. Some systems aren't set up the way we do. So we understand that, and we don't want to tell you something, hey, go do this, because this is what we would do, and that cause you any issues. So, with that, thanks for your time, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
You said that the acid flush is at the end of the season.
It doesn't. It used to be we did it in the spring and the fall. Now, if we can get to your, you know, if we can get to your flush valves and we can get to everything we need to, if Cortland can do that, there's nothing wrong with doing it in season. Now, what I do tell guys is I don't like doing it necessarily before we do the spring startup, because if you have 100 leaks out there or whatever it is, it's not benefiting you, and it's just not very cost effective. And so I think once we get our spring startup done, then I say we come in and we acidize it.
Is this part of your winterization?
It's not included in there. It's an added thing. And I think it's on the service contract. If you you want acid done, you just check the box. I think it is on there, but it's not included in it. No, it's an added feature.
And one thing to kind of reiterate the conversation around acid fertilizers, one of the things you can do is you can substitute, if you use acid fertilizers and you use them strong enough, you can do your own acid treating as your fertigation. Okay, and we can help you with that. So just know that there are other options, especially if you have decent water and you're just doing acid treatment as a preventive maintenance. You can substitute fertilizer as part of your fertigation if you use acid fertilizers. Now, if you have bad iron and manganese, that's a different conversation. But if you're just doing it to knock out hard water and bicarbonates, then we can do it with the fertilizer.
That it? All right, well, thank you.